Welcome, everyone. I'm going to start the meeting, calling it to order. This is the meeting of the Health, Environment, and Community Engagement Committee. I'm the committee chair, Councilmember Cam Gordon, and today I'm joined by Councilmember Elizabeth Glidden, Vice Chair of the committee Andrew Johnson, Jacob Frey, and Lisa Bender. And also we're very lucky to be joined by students from Whittier School who are filling the chambers today. And it's delightful to see you all here. I hope you've got your whole afternoon free because we have a long meeting planned for you. There's 10 items on the agenda, but if anybody has to leave early, we do understand that too. We have Councilmember Cano joining us now. We're certainly a quorum of the committee. We have 5 consent items, and first I'm going to read through the consent items. If any committee member wants to pull something off to discuss that, we can do that, but I'll read through them, and then if we're not pulling anything off, we'll pass them all together. And then we have 4 discussion items. And on one of the discussion items, the Americans with Disabilities Act item, there will be some time for public comment if anybody's here to make a comment on that. So first, the consent agenda. The first item is passing a resolution accepting a gift of $10,000 from Excel Energy and $10,000 from Centerpoint Energy for the Clean Energy Partnership to implement a community engagement pilot project. Second item is approving appointments to the Community Environmental Advisory Commission. There are several appointments listed there. The third item is authorizing an agreement with PACE Analytics Services in the amount not to exceed $120,000 to provide environmental-led services for the city. And this will go from January 1, 2017 to December 31st, 2019. Fourth item is accepting a grant from the School-Based Health Alliance in the amount not to exceed $4,200 to continue participation in the School Health Service National Quality Initiative. And the last consent item is authorizing a contract with Volunteers for America in the amount not to exceed $241,500 to provide community health worker services in select Minneapolis Public Housing Authority high-rise buildings. And that will go from January 1, 2017 to September 29, 2018. And those last 3 items and the first item will also be referred to Ways and Means. Any committee members wish to pull those items for questions or discussion? Any of those items? Seeing none, then I will move all items for approval. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no. Now those motions carry. Then we're on to our discussion items. The first discussion item is about the Minneapolis green zones. It's item number 6. We're going to get an update from Kelly Mullen. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Chair, Council members. I'm Kelly Mullen with the City Coordinator's Office, Sustainability Office. I'm a Sustainability Program Coordinator. And I want to thank you today for having me here to give an update on the Green Zones Work Group. Just as a refresher, back in February, the City Council unanimously approved a resolution establishing the Green Zones Work Group. And the charge for the work group was to use data to develop recommendations for a Green Zones priority areas, criteria and eligibility requirements for designating those Green Zones areas, goals and metrics for each designation, and strategies aimed at improving health and supporting economic development. The work that we did to establish the Green Zones Work Group, we did a call for representatives starting in February of this year. You may remember we included advertisements in your council newsletters. We worked with NCR to reach out to neighborhood associations and other community-based organizations and connected with our own contacts, and then established the work group. The work group has been meeting since April. The work group includes 10 community representatives, including residents, business owners, and nonprofit affiliates, as well as a representative from the Public Health Advisory Committee and the Community Environmental Advisory Commission, as well as 9 agency staff, 7 from our own city departments, 1 from Metro Transit, and 1 from the Park Board. As I mentioned, we've been meeting since April. There's been 8 meetings in total. We spent the first couple of meetings grounding the work group in the topic area of green zones. We did 2 trainings for the work group members. And then in recent months, we've established, or I should say the work group has established 8 priority areas for the green zones. Equity, gentrification, affordable and sustainable housing, green jobs, brownfield and soil contamination, air quality, food access, and greening. We've identified data to measure each of these 8 priority areas, and I'll show that in a moment. And now we're in the process of moving into prioritization of the geographic areas and identifying the strategies and activities that would happen within the green zones. So the council requested that this be a very data-driven process, and we have taken that charge seriously. I want to show you briefly the data that we've pulled around the 8 priority issues. So this is our public website, and as you can see, we have loaded what's called we've called the Green Zones Calculator. It's 32 different data points to measure the 8 priority areas, and you can turn layers on and off to see individually or collectively the impact.
I'll just note that this is actually available on the city website. If committee members want to look it up, it's linked from the staff report, but also people at home who want to look at it later, or people here maybe, this tool is available for others to explore and experiment with.
So this is just an example where I've turned on different indicators, one for each of the different 8 priority issues, and you can see how it changes the priority areas of the map. And just as a quick explanation, the dark orange areas are the areas of highest priority, and that go to the light orange and then light blue and then dark blue as areas that are doing a little better off related to the 8 priority issues. Now I'll just wrap up with our next steps and where we're going with this. So in December, we are planning to review existing place-based initiatives and programs that would be relevant to the 8 Green Zones priority issues. This will inform the prioritization of the Green Zone geographies as well as recommendations for activities and needed resources. Basically, we can't know what we should do until we know what we're already doing. In January, we'll pull all the pieces together, including the criteria for selecting the green zone areas, the priorities, goals and metrics and strategies, and pull that together and finalize it in February and prepare it for City Council review. Additionally, through December through February, we will also be vetting the work group's ideas with communities, likely the priority communities of North, South, the Phillips Powderhorn area, and Northeast that have been highlighted in the data that we've been looking at, just to make sure that the work group's recommendations are on track with community interests. One last thing I'd like to note is that the work group wanted me to share with you how difficult it has been to try and focus in on one priority green zone. It's a challenge and a charge that they are taking very seriously. And they are really using data to just drive the decision making and understanding the existing work to help identify the most strategic places to focus our limited resources. So while they felt crunched for time, they're doing their best to move forward quickly under pressure. Thank you. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Councilmember Bender has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Are there any employer representatives on the work group?
As in, I'm sorry, Chair, Councilmember, as in labor or business owners, or how would you define?
Yes, just since one of the goals is focused on employment. Yes. So anyone who employs people, but representatives from labor or any of the industries.
Yeah, so Chair, Councilmember, we do have 2 business owners on the work group. We don't have anyone from labor.
Maybe what I would be helpful to see is the full list of the sort of descriptors of the work group available? Is that on the website? I know we had gone, there was quite a lot of back and forth about which members should be on this group, and I don't remember where it landed.
It is in the resolution, which is linked on the website, but it's kind of hard to find it. But we did stipulate 8 different groups or representatives, I guess, stakeholder groups who would serve on the task force.
That's helpful. I will look for that.
I also had a question about the original resolution too, and that's why I happened to have it up, so I could act like I was so smart. I'm wondering, did we say that we wanted the group to come back with one recommendation for one pilot area to present to the council? Do you recall? It says council may designate, no.
So Chair, in the language that I'm looking at, it says work with staff and area stakeholders on developing let's see. I thought I had seen that somewhere.
Partly when I'm looking at the information now and all the indicators that you're looking at, is there over 20 of them, or there's quite a few?
There are 32.
32, thank you.
Data points. Yeah.
So that's more than I was expecting, but it also shows the work group is really trying to look at all the different variety of variables, and I understand that they haven't even maybe identified what they think are the most important or weighty. There's 32 that you're working with now, and you can look at it on the map. But looking at that, it does look like there might be a few different areas that would qualify to be designated somehow, and I've looked at it from different ways. So I was concerned with one of your comments that maybe we had given such policy that the work group was getting overwhelmed being able to designate one particular site. And so I was curious if we actually said that. In my mind, I'm sure we're open to some flexibility about it. At least I am, depending on what the results are that come back. So you can take that as a comment. And I see that there's several other questions, so I'll keep looking at the resolution to see if I can find that. Councilmember Frey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Two questions. So first, and I could be wrong here, but I believe that union or labor was supposed to be one of the members on this committee. Did someone reach out to them just to ensure that they had participation?
Thank you, Chair, Council Member. So we did reach out to, I believe, 2 different union representatives, and they were unable to participate.
Okay. And then what's the number of businesses that are presently on it? I know that there was one request for a business that had substantial knowledge in environmentally friendly and green activities that was supposed to partake. Is that the case, or were they also not able to participate?
Yeah, so Chair, Council Member, we do have 2 business owners on the work group, and one owns a small business and the other is the executive director or president of a large industry. Okay,
that's helpful. And then finally, and this is a more broad question, but I can see the committee running into difficulties on this topic, which is gentrification. Obviously, one of the goals of this project is to improve the neighborhoods that are designated as green zones, to make the air quality, to improve the air quality, to improve the greening, and to improve the environment in general. Now, when you do those things, when you improve the air quality, when you improve the greening, when you do all this stuff, it improves the neighborhood and the prices go up. How are they balancing that with gentrification?
Chair, Council Member, that is one of the strategy areas that we will be looking into. There's work that has been done across the country developing strategies for that, and some local community-based organizations that are looking into best practices that we hope to learn from.
Do you know what those are offhand or not? Okay.
I don't.
Okay. That's it. Thank you.
Councilmember Cano.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I concur with you in that it was my understanding we were looking at green zones designations throughout our city, not just one area, but multiple areas. And I see that in your presentation, you even use that language too, green zones, priority areas. So it is a plural approach. That was my understanding, but would be happy to look at the language previously that we approved and codified. Ms. Mullman, on the 32 data points, are those data points weighted in any manner, or are they prioritized so that certain data points are given more of an importance in the way that they shape the conversation, because I could see how 32 data points actually dilute the focus of the work and they become just a neutralizing force in the conversation instead of actually zeroing in, on some of the problems.
Chair, council member. So with the online data tool, if you turn on all 32, each data point has an equal weight. So the 8 data points within equity would overbalance the data points that under issues that maybe have fewer. However, the way that we have taken the data within the work group is to give each of the 8 priority issues equal weight. So if there are 8 data points under equity, that just has one value that is equal to the green jobs issue, even if it has fewer data points. So we're averaging those values. So each priority issue has the same weight across. And that's where we're starting from. However, we are working with the work group to potentially prioritize those. So 8 areas to move forward with is a lot, and we want to make sure that we're focusing in on the ones that are most important to the work group members. That may result in weighting in the work group proposing that we weight 1 or 2 or 3 of the priority issues higher than the others, but we haven't finalized that decision yet.
Okay. Thank you for that information. I'm very interested in how that pans out. You mentioned this issue of as you were talking, I heard something about limited resources, that the group was concerned about limited resources. Can you expand on that a little bit? What were they referring to?
Sure, Chair, council member. That was just in the sense of the city itself has limited resources, and as a general statement.
Okay. I would just encourage the community folks on the work group to, help us do a good job of looking at the problem and the issue, and not be afraid of the decisions that we have to take as a council when it comes to resources. I think the role of the work group is to really help us identify the gaps, identify the situations and the realities and the challenges that our community members are facing. And then we as council members have to decide what to do with the resources. So I just wanted to relay that to the work group so that they're not overburdening themselves with decisions that don't really fall on their purview, but that fall on a policymaker's table.
Thank you. I can appreciate that too. And it might be that it would be useful to hear about with existing resources, here's what we could offer, and here's where there might be some needs or something like that could be helpful. I did look at the resolution, and it sounds like we're asking the work group to gather the data and draft recommendations regarding green zone priority areas, designation criteria and eligibility, goals and metrics tracking, etc. But then later on, when it talks about the council actually designating it, it does say, upon acceptance of the work group's report and recommendations, council may designate a zone-specific task force, and then it goes on, talks about that. So I think the council could designate 2 zone-specific task forces if I wanted. I know that was part of a big discussion that we had about what's the next step, and so we kind of teed it up here. I'll also note that one of the other resolve clauses was that we get all the final recommendations reported to us by the 4th quarter of 2016. So you can see we pass these resolutions, and sometimes we don't hit all the resolve clauses right on target. But I'm really glad you came back for this report. So in a way we did. We have a presentation of the recommendations so far, but you're expecting to come back again in March. Is that right? Of next year? With final
Chair, hopefully by
recommendations?
first quarter.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And I think we have a few more comments or questions. Councilmember Bender and Frey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wondered, I know this is further down in the next steps, but if you've made any progress on defining what a green zone means for Minneapolis, looking at all of the different indicators, this touches transportation and housing quality and inspections, certainly touches employment and potentially industrial related issues. So it's covering a lot of ground here, which I think is good. I think it's good to have this data mapped for a lot of different policy reasons, but Has there been any progress on sort of focusing in on what is a green zone? In Minneapolis, I know different communities have different definitions or different policy tools that they're using in this designation.
Chair, council member, the work group felt it was very important to include all 8 of the priority issues. When it came down to it, they were basically unwilling to give up any one because they're also critically important to a healthy and thriving community. And so I think the charge or the task at hand is really to focus in on which are the biggest priorities. If there is one pilot or multiple pilots within each of those communities, the focus might be a little bit different based on that specific community's need.
I think that makes sense. It's probably just worth noting that a lot of this also touches, a lot of ongoing work that multiple departments are doing across the city, citywide. So the lead inspections, for example, just comes to mind as one. So there may be ways that even if, so maybe there's a concentrated geographic focused effort in a green zone, but a lot of these issues are also obviously citywide needs for policy and investment.
Thank you. Councilmember Frey?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I don't mean to harp, but I'm really interested in this concept of gentrification, and I don't want to be simultaneously pushing back on the work that we're doing because we have goals that are at odds with one another. And by that, I mean we're investing significantly in an area, values will go up, thus creating some gentrification to a certain extent, unless we have adequate funding for affordable housing and a bunch of other areas. And I don't know whether should form this in a staff direction, but I would like to see the information compiled from other jurisdictions on how they've improved an area in the green zone context without experiencing displacement and gentrification. I mean, I'm assuming a lot of it focuses on affordable housing. I don't know if there's other strategies as well. So if we could, I'll just go ahead and make a staff direction. And so the staff direction would be when you come back in March, if you could include these strategies to make improvements without experiencing gentrification and displacement. So I'll go ahead and make that motion for a staff direction.
Okay. So there's a motion before us. Did you get that, Committee Clerk? Thank you. Any questions or discussion on the staff direction? Councilmember Cano?
Yes, Councilmember Frey, if you could just please explain gentrification so the definition is clear.
Well, Councilmember, Mr. Chair, Councilmember Cano, you make a good point. The definition of what constitutes gentrification is sometimes vague and ambiguous and at least very broad. I am looking at it, although I understand fully that it encompasses much more than this, I am looking at it in terms of displacement due to increased value and prices.
Could we add a clarification on the definition? That's a displacement of low-income people, communities of color, immigrant communities, and indigenous people?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. I will add that, make an amendment to that staff direction.
Okay. I'm just a little bit curious, would this also relate to commercial space? Because often gentrification is referring to housing costs, but what we sometimes see when we improve these areas, and there's the potential in these, if this is in a commercial or industrial area, that actually some of the resources will come in and help keep the space affordable and make improvements for some of those businesses.
Yeah. Mr. Chair, yes, I believe this would apply to commercial space. I believe it would apply to industrial space. In wards 1 and to a certain extent 3, we have quite a bit of industrial, and when that industrial is rezoned over commercial and/or residential, you do occasionally see some gentrification that takes place. So I think I'm not specifying here on what it pertains to, whether it's commercial or residential or industrial, but I would like to see some strategies used in other cities and states to make the necessary investments in these communities that are struggling without then pushing the same communities out.
Okay, and I wasn't suggesting amending the staff direction. That was just a question that I had.
It's fair. Good question.
Appreciate that. Any other discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no. That motion carries.
Councilman.
And I suppose given what we've been learning recently, we better ask the question about unintended consequences of pushing costs up and displacing people about almost all our decisions these days. Councilmember Connell.
Thank you. I just have one last point. I appreciate your motion, Councilmember Frey, and your thoughtful approach at this issue. In terms of gentrification, I just sent yourself and Chairman Gordon a link to a project that has been working on environmental justice issues through an anti-displacement, anti-gentrification approach. And when the work group talks about gentrification, I would encourage them to look at the ecosystem that creates gentrification. And so it's not just about housing prices going up, but it's also about worker incomes getting lower or remaining stagnant over time, as well as opportunities for jobs and for, in general, just improving people's lives. And so as we're improving the environment, the physical environment of where people live, we also have to improve the structural opportunities that these low-income community members and underserved communities experience, which are connected to institutional racism and to structural injustices. And so this website that I just circulated to our two council members having this discussion here is about, working with the communities that live in these areas to retain them in this space, to provide opportunities for them to anchor themselves in these communities, and to be the leaders of these conversations around economic development and green, environmentally friendly businesses. And so there's a way to the way to do this would be a two-pronged approach, which is obviously phasing out the industrial polluters in these areas and phasing out other kinds of pollution that is happening here, but then also investing in the people to ensure that they have the opportunities to get the jobs that will likely be opened up through an improvement in this area, as well as looking at things like raising the wage, which the city of Minneapolis is already doing, and creating an ecosystem that counters the gentrification forces. So it's a very dynamic set of strategies that would likely come out of a conversation like that. And I would encourage the work group to look at the issue of gentrification through that lens. I sent you the link as well.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Connell. Councilmember Bender.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this is a great discussion, and again, it may be manageable taking on all of these citywide issues if the scope is a geographically constrained area, but I did want to comment that I think that we're sort of getting into the work of the Minneapolis City Council here when we're talking about all of these sort of land use issues and housing cost issues, rental inspection issues, employment. So I just want to be cognizant of the fact that we're asking a group of volunteers to make policy recommendations around a specific tool called a green zone. We haven't really defined what that means for Minneapolis. I look forward to the recommendations coming out of the group, but just wanted to note that, this is sort of one aspect of all of these big citywide issues, and maybe we need to sort of also make sure that we're managing expectations about what staff in this group of volunteers can take on. Just throw that out there.
And I also just want to note, partly because I was reviewing the original resolution, that this group was charged with kind of coming up with how to make a designation, what's the criteria, what does it mean, a little bit of a bigger picture. But in the resolution, then we say once an area is designated, then there needs to be a lot of work that goes into that area. And I think some of these issues, including how do we counterbalance any possible displacement, or these things could be the work then of that green zone area task force or leadership steering committee that gets designated. So I appreciate that we might be piling more on there, but you have the staff direction before you. And seeing no other comments, then I just want to thank you for the presentation and move to receive and file this report. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair, council members.
Next, we have item number 7 on our agenda, and this is the 2017-2019 Americans with Disability Action Plan. And Mr. Rubador will tee this up for a report, and we also want to take some public comments. So I think we'll take the report first, and then we'll open it if anybody wants to make a few comments about it. Welcome.
Chair Gordon, committee members, good afternoon. I'm David Rubador, Director of the Neighborhood and Community Relations Department with the City of Minneapolis. I'm here today to present, or at least introduce, the final Americans with Disabilities action plan for the council approval. The committee members may recall back in July, we had a chance to review a draft of this plan. Since that time, we received a considerable amount of public comment on it. We've been continuing to work with other city departments on the finalization of the plan, and we're here today to present the final plan. So the action before you on this item is to request the council to approve the 2017 through 19 ADA action plan with the comprised policies and strategies to comply with the Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act, with the idea that this plan would go into effect January 1st, 2017. As you may recall, this is a body of work that the city took on voluntarily. We have not been compelled by any particular outside interest other than our own to be able to ensure that all of our programs and services, as well as our decision-making processes, are really open for people with disabilities. So this is an act that we have taken on ourselves. And it really has been a significant body of work over the last 2 years. We have spent a 2-year period doing an evaluation in collaboration with Property Services and the Public Works Department, really looking at all aspects of the city's work in compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act. In addition to the departments that we've been working with to lead on this, we have this work has actually touched every department within the city enterprise. We've had a chance to meet with and be able to evaluate and review their work in order to ensure that we have the correct actions in place. I want to be clear about the action being requested of you today is that this is an adoption of the plan and the policy behind it, and really the intended outcomes and the corrective measures. In the plan itself, it does include estimated cost items. This is not a budgetary action that's being requested today. This is an adoption of the plan. The individual departments, when they're ready to move forward with the corrective actions that are included in the plan, will bring those budget requests individually to the city council through the regular budget process. I'm going to just do a quick overview of the ADA and how it relates to our work, and then I'm going to hand the presentation over to Nick Noll, who is the lead staff person who's going to go through the actual evaluation work on a high level, and then we're going to go through the plan components. Just as a reminder, the Neighborhood and Community Relations Department oversees 2 federal civil rights laws, or at least the city's compliance with 2 federal civil rights laws. One is language access. The City Council adopted a new language access plan in 2015, which significantly revised our services to the non-English speaking communities of our city. And this is the second part of that, which is the Americans with Disabilities Act, which was adopted in 1990. The city, the purpose of these 2 civil rights acts and the work that we do behind them really is intended to support the One Minneapolis goal by removing barriers to participation for all members of our community. As with the language access plan, the ADA plan that you see before you exceeds federal requirements and really is a robust plan about making sure that people with disabilities are able to participate in our civic process. And just a little bit more of a history on this thing, on the ADA. When the ADA was first adopted in 1990, the city completed a transition plan in 1993. The action before you today is really a revision and an update of that original transition plan from 1993. As you would probably surmise, the technology and communications capabilities have changed considerably, and the ADA has changed considerably since its original adoption. So the plan today really updates the city's work in those particular areas. So with that, I'd like to hand it over to Mr. Noll.
Thank you, Director Rubidor, Chair Gordon, council members. Thank you for having me here. Good afternoon. My name is Nick Noll, and I'm the ADA and Language Access Coordinator for the Neighborhood and Community Relations Department. Before I start, I just want to say thank you to our city departments and our advisory committee on people with disabilities for partnering with us on this endeavor. This has been a large body of work, and it takes a lot of buy-in and a lot of work to make sure that we not only meet compliance, but go beyond the ADA. So today, I'm just going to go over what the plan is and its outcomes and changes since we last presented to you in July. Really quick, what we have in front of you is sort of our ADA infrastructure for the city. The two technical pieces is with Property Services and Public Works, who oversees our physical infrastructure. Property Services with our city-owned and leased buildings, and Public Works managing our city-owned right-of-ways, streets, and maintenance of those policies. Traditionally, the ADA looks at the physical infrastructure, and these two departments have taken it upon themselves to also do an evaluation of the physical inventory that we have under the city. Just as Director Rubidor has mentioned, NCR manages the Title II compliance piece of the ADA, making sure that we have an identified ADA Title II coordinator, which is Director Rubidor, as well as grievance procedures and ways to modify and enhance our programs and policies if we find them inaccessible to people with disabilities as well as our other residents. This last year, we started an evaluation in the summer to review our programs and services. And what we have before you is a overall plan with executive summaries from Property Services and Public Works. During our evaluation process, we had two public perception survey going out to city staff as well as the public to identify if they know what our ADA infrastructure is, as well as the compliance pieces and what they need in terms of enhancements and knowledge around what the ADA is and what the issues are. So a lot of that comment and the work both from city staff as well as our advisory committee and the public has helped shape us into determining what our plan is for that we have ahead of you. In July, we brought the plan or draft plan to this committee to be released for public comment. Since then, has changed significantly with more detailed, strategies to making sure that we remove barriers to participation. And during this time, we worked with the Advisory Committee on People with Disabilities. We went to the Committee on Aging, as well as we've had comments from other residents throughout the city as well. So what we have is a comprehensive policy document. That's what the ADA action plan is. It's meant to be dynamic and ever-growing. Knowing that the ADA is currently evolving, we want to make sure that our plan is also have the capacity to do so as well. One of the changes we made is making sure that we do an annual review, which we would report back to this committee. If there are any significant changes that need to be made, we would propose an amendment to that plan. And I think we plan to do that third and fourth quarter. And that also means that we will present any updates that Public Works and Property Services present as well. As the Director Rubidor mentioned, we want to make sure that the adoption of this plan is really around the strategies and the outcomes and not around the cost estimates. Those are purely informative, and it's just meant to make sure that we know what are the necessary resources to achieve those outcomes. If we find that that those shifts or any strategies needs to be made differently, we will present that at the end of the next year as well. So a broad overview of the plan. A lot of what we found in our evaluation is that we need to consistently review our policies and procedures. And what we've built into this plan is that even though we have great work that's being done right now to make sure that our policies and programs and services are accessible to everyone, we just need to make sure that we consistently review that with not only our advisory committee on people with disabilities, but with the public as well. So plans such as our emergency operations plan, our fire evacuation plan, which is really around safety, we just want to make sure that we continually revisit that to make sure that it considers everyone across all mobilities as well. The large changes and enhancements that we have in front of you is with communications, IT, as well as NCR. The last time that we were at this committee, we said that we were going to implement a captioning as part of our city informational videos as well as council meetings. What we have in this iteration of the plan is a more finite plan in how to roll that out. We want to start with informational videos, then moving into capturing full city councils and then the council standing committees as well. We identified that we want to utilize vendor services and hire part-time staff to manage that contract as well as gather other informational videos from other departments. One of the primary reasons that we wanted to start with informational videos is understanding that a lot of our city services and the information of how to access and utilize those programs and services are within our videos. Secondly, with our IT, our proposed enhancements around that is changing and updating our website management system. We recognize that our system right now is somewhat outdated, as well as has some digital barriers to people that use assistive devices and technology. What we identified in this iteration of the plan is that we will move forward with implementing a new system. IT will be spearheading that charge and figuring out how to secure the funding as well as implement that charge, and then as well as developing an accessible technology policy, working with the web content user guides across departments to make sure that they know what the accessibility components are, as well as developing guidelines and procedures, making sure that the information and what we post online is accessible to everyone.
So I just wanted to interrupt.
Sure.
So if we look in the plan now, you have the amended costs for the communications components and the IT components in there, and the money and the zero for 2017 for communications and $400,000 in 2017 for IT are part of the proposed budget.
Correct.
Okay.
And those departments will move those pieces forward as when they're ready to implement them as well.
Thank you. And I'll just note for my colleagues that communications department staff did brief me on the changes they made. They wanted to be here today, but most of them are at a required, or I don't know if it's required, but a emergency management conference out of town today.
And to continue the presentation, one of the other changes that we made to this revision is that NCR will undertake we will undertake a training or providing resources to city staff around disability awareness as well as specialty topics to make sure that they have the best resources possible to deliver their programs and services. We understand that topics such as accessible PDFs, what the web content and accessibility guidelines are, as well as accessible events are very highly critical areas with not only our Committee on People with Disabilities, but with the general public as well. So we want to make sure that we provide quarterly trainings for as much city staff as possible. Secondly, develop and work more closely with the Advisory Committee on People with Disabilities. We found that when we create a strong partnership with our appointed boards and commissions and our departments, the outcome is a very effective and better product. So an example of that is the taxi cab ordinance that we passed a few years ago as well. So we want to make sure that we bring as many departments and programs and divisions back to our advisory committee so that way we can work with making sure that the policies and what they have are accessible to everyone. And then lastly, working with our property services division to make sure that when there's any alteration or change in the physical location of programs and services, that we work with each other to make sure that that space is accessible to everyone. And then working to create a technical assistance program for our neighborhoods organization as well, recognizing that NCR provides the funding as well as they have to oversee Title II and Title III regulations of the ADA and making sure that they have the resources and knowledge and capacity to make their programs and services accessible to the residents that they serve. Really quick, I just want to provide an overview of the physical infrastructure that property services and public works